So, I'm filming this in the dark. So, quote unquote, filming this, I guess. I'm half asleep. Quite literally, I'm half asleep. I'm in bed right now. I'm half asleep. And then I thought about the PSG result. Well, most of the PSG game. And I thought, you know what, I want to talk about this. So this will be a video without video. So this will just be, just listen to my voice, basically, all right? And I have a fan going on in the background. I have the heater as well. I always have both when I sleep. Um, so you may hear some background noise. The audio is not perfect. I'm lying down in bed while holding my phone, so the audio is definitely not perfect. But I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit because it's on my mind right now, and I have a platform where I can talk about things. I know it's not Bayern related, but oh well. So what? Um, shoot. All right. So obviously, in case you haven't heard, the PSG versus I'm gonna butcher the name, so I'm not even gonna attempt to say it. But the PSG game was abandoned because the fourth official, the fourth assistant, the fourth referee, referred to the other team, the team that PSG played against, their assistant manager as, was it their manager or was it PSG's? I'm not 100% sure actually now. But essentially, an assistant manager was referred to as that black guy. In Romanian, Negru, I believe. Negrul. I'm not sure which one, Negru or Negrul. It's one of those two, all right? And then that kind of like everyone then started to get annoyed and furious with it, and they decided to walk out. The assistant referee, he was trying to explain that Negrul, just means that black person, that black man. That's just, he wasn't doing this, with any malice. That's basically the point that he was arguing. And the reason why I want to talk about this because there are many reasons, all right. But the reason why I was thinking about this just before I was heading to bed is actually very simple. Like I was actually already asleep. Like when you're like half asleep and you like suddenly you just like before you like you're like 99% asleep, and like before that final 1% you just start thinking of something like, damn it, I need to talk about it. I've got this on my mind right now. I need to express my thoughts on this, and that's kind of me right now. So if I kind of like stumble over my words, just take it with a grain of salt. This is story time with Prince. That's all. That's basically what this video will be. All right. But yeah, I don't think I want to make this point clear very at the beginning. I don't think the assistant referee is racist. I know many people are saying, well, he's racist, so on and so forth. I don't think he is racist, and I'll get to that in a second. All right. But and I also want to say, like, listen to the full video before you make your mind up, before you comment down below. Just listen to the full video for once before you comment. Before you write first, before you say, well, this video is BS, this video is amazing, so on and so forth. I've heard it all. Just listen for now. That's why we're not doing video, I guess. Haha, that's my excuse. Just listen for now. So here's what I think actually is the case. I think the referee is ignorant. The assistant referee, I should say. I think the assistant referee, you know what I'm talking about. I think the assistant referee is ignorant. I don't think he is racist. And there is a distinction. Now, I'm not saying this maliciously. I'm not saying he was saying things maliciously in a hurtful manner or anything of that sort. He probably, he was talking to his team and he was saying, that black man, that's the person, that I'm booking. However, the issue really stems from the term. Referring to someone by the color of the skin. Now, I've got a very thick skin, so this doesn't actually apply to me, because you can call me whatever you want. Like, you could call me whatever you want, any racial slur, and I honestly don't care. Like, I'm that kind of person. You could say whatever you want, and I'll just make fun of you for it, that's kind of my thing. But you have to realize that, like, a lot of people, and I'm not saying this, just for, black people, there are plenty of, not just racist, but there are plenty of, I don't want to say oppressed people necessarily, but there are plenty of minorities out there. And there are plenty of offensive words towards minorities. And it's not just minorities that can get offended. I know people always say, well, you can't offend majority because, the whole purpose of being oppressed is the majority oppressing the minority. And there is a point to be made, but there are plenty of different ways of minority. You know, there's financial minority, there is racial minority, there is cultural minority. There are plenty of different minorities that one has to accept. And then, you know, people always say, well, you know, if you're rich, one argument that I constantly hear, which actually drives me nuts personally, is like, if you're rich, if you're white, if you're male, you can't be oppressed. And it's like, you don't know that. You don't know that. You know, they could be oppressed emotionally. There, you know, you can be an emotional minority too. There are many forms of minorities. You know, just because we're not necessarily thinking of this, you know, just because we're not necessarily thinking of the same struggles doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have a struggle. Just because we not understand, just because we aren't listening, or we aren't hearing a person and how they feel they're oppressed. You may not agree that they're being oppressed, but at the end of the day, you know, equality from a position of power looks what's the phrase? I forgot what the phrase is, but asking for equality from a position, looking at someone asking from a position of forget that quote. All right, it's something stupid, like someone with power, someone from a position of power, someone that isn't being oppressed, looking at people that are being oppressed, asking for equality, looks like revolution, something like that. It's something along those lines. And it's, you know, the quote is not that important. The point is the message. You know, if you think, oh well, I'm being culturally oppressed, I'm a cultural minority, you know, hence, you know, I only I can judge what someone, you know, only I can judge if someone is being oppressed or not. That's foolish. You may be, you know, you may be oppressed in one way but not in another. So you have to take that into consideration, which is why I think it, you know, in general, it's a very stupid thing to say, but in general, I think people, I don't agree that racism is a thing. I think ignorance to a race, you know, we're talking about race right now, ignorance to a race is a thing. I don't think racism inherently, you know, the whole supremacy aspect of it, I don't think that is necessarily a thing. I think it stems more so from a lack of understanding, and more so from a lack of a lack of knowledge. And you know, understanding and knowledge can go hand in hand, but I do think, like, the great other. There's always a great other, the great unknown, and that's kind of where it all stems from. I don't think people are inherently like, oh well, my race is the best for X, Y, and Z reasons. I think people are just like, I don't understand that race. They're different to me. They're different in these aspects. Their culture is different. Their attitude is different, and I don't understand it. So I'm afraid of that. They won't necessarily say I'm afraid of that, but you know, that's what they're thinking, like, well, I don't understand it, I don't agree with that, or I do agree with that, I would not. But they are different, they are worse than I am. And I don't think necessarily, like, people in a way hype themselves up, but they rather lower other people because they don't understand it. That's really where I think the concept of racism. I'm not here to get philosophical on you right now, so don't misinterpret that. I just wanted to kind of get that thought out the way before I move on to, you know, the assistant referee part, because I feel like that's the important part here. Now, the assistant referee part, I actually feel for him a little bit. I know that's sacrilegious to say. Just listen, right? I feel for him a little bit, you know, despite how controversial that may be to hear, because I get it. I get it. I'm not here to make an excuse for him. Personally, I'll say this right away, I guess. I don't think he should be refereeing a game anymore. But I don't think he is racist. I think he's just more so foolish. And the reason why I feel sorry for him is because he is foolish. Okay, here, I kind of need to explain this. I always lived in a city. And when you live in a city, you get surrounded by many different cultures. You get surrounded by many different people from all walks of life, with all their stories, so on and so forth. You know, I used to, as you all know, I used to live in Munich, the first 11 years of my life. Then I used to live 1 year in Lincoln, and then since then I've lived 12 years now in Manchester. All right, so Munich and Manchester, the third biggest city in Germany and the third biggest city in England. So I've always lived in these big cities, So I've always met plenty of people from different cultures. I'd say in Germany, in Munich, you definitely meet a lot of Turkish people. In England, I feel like it's a little bit more multicultural, where you meet I'd say a lot of Nigerian people and a lot of Indian people. Those are predominantly like the walks of life, the cultures, the clashes of cultures, I guess you want to call it that. Not really clashes, but more so the what's the right phrase I'm looking for? The combination of cultures that you see in the UK predominantly and in Germany predominantly. So I've always lived in big cities. But I also, when I was younger, not so much nowadays, but when I was younger, once every summer, I used to visit like these very rural places, like in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And these would always be like a school trip, or then there would just be a trip, like a special program, whatnot. And they used to be predominantly in Germany, but then they would also be in other countries. So I would often travel to other countries for like a week or two, just to stay at a hut or something, just like a summer vacation hut or whatnot, just to have some fun and whatnot. And these used to be like rural places, predominantly I'd say Eastern Europe. And what I learned very quickly is that they would use words that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. Now I'm a kid, right? And as I said at the beginning, I need to as I preface this, I don't really get offended at all. So you can say whatever you want about me. I don't really care. But as a kid, that was a lot different. People would say whatever they wanted. Right? I used to go to these places, and they would say, "Look, I don't want to get this. I don't care if this video is demonetized to be completely, but I don't want this video to get taken down from YouTube and we to get like a copyright or community strike, whatever they're called." But like people would say, just imagine like the meanest things that you could possibly hear. Very similar, I guess, to the assistant referee like saying "negro." That is not so. That is not so. I wouldn't say that is necessarily that. Yeah, it's difficult. It's very weird to say not that offensive, but it's not that aggressive. Let's call it that. But I would have people say a lot more aggressive things to me. But what I found out very quickly is that in many countries, now again, I've lived in countries where this isn't necessarily the case, which is why I also said if you're in America, this video is probably difficult for you to understand. But like these countries that I visited, even though it was only 2 weeks, they were the nicest people you could ever meet. But they would say things that, for example, in Germany or in England, nobody would say because it wasn't okay. But in like these other countries, they would say because it was okay. Because they didn't necessarily like go through, I don't want to say evolution, but they didn't necessarily have a history with racism, so they never really had to like move on from that history of racism. They may not look down on you in that manner. They may just say whatever they say without like any ill intent, but at the end of the day, if you're saying something, even if it's to you it's innocent, it may be harmful to someone else. You may say something that you think, oh well, that's acceptable, that's normal to say. Everyone else says it. Everyone else in my place, everyone else in my city, everyone else in my country says it, but that may still be harmful to other people. And I feel like that's exactly what happened with the Romanian. That's actually where I kind of draw my my experience from, which is why I'm saying I don't think he's racist. I think he is ignorant. I don't think he's necessarily evolved. But I also don't think he should be a referee in the future, because referees, at the end of the day, they're supposed to be the guidance. They're supposed to be the guiding light, the judges, the executioner of decisions, the rightfulness. And just from that perspective, I don't think you can have a referee that is ignorant, because nobody's going to respect him anymore. But in many of these places that I visited, they would say things that would be offensive without meaning to be offensive, and they would say it because that's how they were brought up. They weren't brought. They don't necessarily dislike you, but they would still say whatever what they were saying because they didn't think, well, that's just what I'm told. It's not really offensive now, is it? I'm not meaning you any ill harm. I'm not being aggressive, or I'm not being vicious to you. I'm not like trying to insult you. I'm not trying to discredit you. But it would still be that. it would still be that, just because you're not trying to doesn't mean that what you're saying is not the case. Now, granted, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite right now because there is a drink that I like to drink. It's not necessarily called that, but there is a drink in it's more like a mixture, honestly. There is a drink that is called nigger, which is basically like the German word, the German way of saying nigger. And basically the drink is beer with Coke. So if you go to a bar, you say I want that, they know what you mean, all right? But like, again, it's not meant to be harmful. But like it can come across that. Like the first time, granted, that was never the case for me. So because my mum owned a bar, so like when I heard her say it for the first time, I was like, what, what? But like she did obviously, because she owned a bar. She was like, yeah, I want that, I want this, I don't care. Granted, so it is what it is. Like there is a thing where you have to look at different language, and the reason why I'm saying like it might not apply to America is because obviously America, you predominantly speak English, and obviously also evolved. I want to say evolved through the history of racism and the history of oppression and the history of what is acceptable to say and what is not acceptable to say. Now, granted, in America, you also have a lot of Spanish people, and obviously the Spanish word for black is negro. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the word negro. If you go to Spain, if I go to Spain, I'll say, gosh, I can't speak Spanish, but I'd say, mi gato, gato negro. Yeah, my black cat. All right. Yeah, like I'd have absolutely no issue with that. And granted, I say whatever I want anyway, so I don't have an issue with that anyway. Because again, that personally it doesn't apply to me. But that's not the point here. I'm not like it's not about me. It's about the players. It's about the situation in a broad light. Now, why is that black man, negro, a wrong thing to say? I think I kind of like explained it a little bit already, but like just because it's not offensive to you, if someone else heard that, right, it can be offensive to them without you meaning ill intent. And some people will say, well, just don't get offended. And that is an argument that one can make, but it is a silly argument to make because at the end of the day, you're not the person that has the right to say what one another, can get offended by. It's the very same principle like that I'm saying. You can say whatever you want to me. I don't have an issue, right? I said that already. You can say what you want to me. You can insult me. Do what you want. I've heard it all. Trust me, I've heard it all. Everything that you could possibly say to me, I've definitely had a comment. I've definitely had someone saying a heated argument, so on and so forth. You can say whatever you want to me. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I've got a very thick skin. But just because I have a thick skin doesn't mean that the person next to me has a thick skin. All right? Everyone is different. We all know that. Right? We all know that, right? We're all different. We're all different emotionally. We're all different culturally. We're all different, even culturally. Like you may say, well, there's a certain vibe. When you think of one culture, when you think of Jamaican culture, they are very much all the same. No, even within the Jamaican culture, there are very many different subcultures. And that applies to everything. Everyone is different. Also, everyone has different experiences. everyone has a different tolerance. For example, I can lose, and this is a completely different scenario, but I think this might get a good point across. I can, say I earn 2,000 a month, right? Just a random number. Say I earn 2,000 a month. I could spend 2K, my whole monthly salary. I could spend that on a bet, and if I lose, whatever. But then there are other people out there, like I'd be like, whatever. But then there are other people out there that if they lose £10, if they lose 20, if they lose half their salary, they would absolutely lose it. Another example. I could right now be kicked out of my house and live on the street, and I would have no issue, because then I just decide, you know what, I'm walking from one city to the next city to the next city, and I'll just walk and see what the cities have in store for me. Other people, they would be absolutely devastated. So I don't have any right to judge someone else. They don't have any right to judge me. Because at the end of the day, we're all different people. We're all unique. We're all special. Nobody's more special than someone else. This whole concept of looking up to someone is ridiculous. We're all people. We're all unique. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the best that we can. Nobody here is intentionally worsening themselves. They may not necessarily have the willpower to do good, but nobody here wakes up, the next morning is like, you know what? I'm gonna cut off my arm. I'm gonna start eating plastic. Nobody does that. We all try and move forward. We all try and learn. We all try and develop. We all try and evolve. We all try and be better. In whatever, you may not notice it necessarily. You may not do it consciously. You may do it subconsciously. But we all try and move forward. And that's the thing that we have to understand. That's the thing that we all have to understand, all right? That at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all humans, right? We're all people. We're all who we are. And not to bring it back to Bayern right now, but mir san mir. We are who we are. It's a slogan, yeah. But the point is still there. The point is still there. Now, of course, the slogan is really there for other things. Yeah? It really is more so we are who we are in terms of the attitude, in terms of, the personality, in terms of the culture as well. We all have different cultures. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Well, what you really got to take into consideration right now, what you really got to take into consideration is that a referee, I can't imagine him to be racist. There is no reason. Why would I, as a referee, right? Why would I decide to become an assistant referee? Most of the people that are assistant referees, they did it from a young age. They love football. That's it. They love football. They probably couldn't become a footballer because, they weren't either good enough or they just weren't able to. And so they were like, you know what? What's the next best thing I could do? Oh, referee. I can work my way up and hopefully maybe one day I'll referee, a top flight game. There is absolutely no conceivable way that this referee woke up today. He was like, you know what? I'm gonna friggin' call this guy negro in an offensive manner. There is no way. He's just ignorant. He didn't realize, you know what? This guy might consider that offensive. In my language, it might be A-okay. And you know what? It might be A-okay. If you go to Romania, honestly, you have no right to complain. And now I'm gonna have to explain what I mean by that. But if you go to Romania right now, right, and he were to say negrul, you really can't say, why did you call me that, if it's acceptable in their culture. But this isn't their culture. This is a football game. You're surrounded by people that aren't from your culture. If somebody is from your culture, they will understand what you're saying. They will understand why you're saying it. They will understand the context. They will understand the intention. The issue here is football is not, unless you're playing in just your league, but even then, football, the world is not just, it is not just one culture. Your surroundings, any given time, your surroundings, you're most likely surrounded now by people from many different cultures. So saying something that you may find acceptable might not be acceptable to them. And that's what you gotta take into consideration. It might, if it's a genuine mistake, you gotta own up to it. That's the first. I don't want to. Look, man. Just listening to the videos of that assistant referee when he was saying, "Well, Negrul, that's my culture, man. That's what we say in my country." Like, yeah, that's fine and dandy, but you're officiating a game where people that are not familiar with your culture, where people that are not familiar with your language, they'll hear something and they can then draw a conclusion. Now, the conclusion may be right or wrong, but they'll still be able to draw a conclusion, because that's what the world is. If I were to say right now something ridiculous, let me think of something real quick. If I were to say, what was it? What's a good example? If I were to say, I can't even think of anything. But like, if I were to say something between me and my friends, right? Because that is the circle that is established between me and my friends. We can joke about things, we can say things between each other that I probably wouldn't say on video. Now, granted, I don't really care what I say on video at the end of the day, right? As long as it doesn't get taken down, I say whatever I want. But like, I'll say things to my friends that I probably wouldn't say on video. I'll say things to my friends that I probably wouldn't say to my parents. I say things to my boss that I probably wouldn't say to my friends, and vice versa. There are many different situations in life where many different etiquettes have to be observed. And I believe in free speech. I believe, fully, you have to say, you can say what you want, but also other people can very much get offended by what you want. Now, I granted this video, there is no video. But if you've watched any of my videos before, you see on that whiteboard, it says ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 10. The right to express yourself. The right for freedom of expression. AKA, say whatever the hell you want to say. But we've also come a long way. Many countries have forbidden speech, hate speech. Not every country has it, but many countries have it. And the reason we have that is because we evolved culturally. We're trying to be more aware of different cultures. That's really what it is. Be aware. Respect. Maybe not even respect. That's probably the wrong word. Because, again, I don't think the assistant referee is racist. I think he's just ignorant. It's not that he disrespects the other cultures. I think it's just, I think it's just the fact that he was in his own mind. He didn't think it was offensive. He didn't think it was wrong. He thought like, I'm talking to my mates, I'm talking to my colleagues, I'm talking to my, other referees. But other people heard him. They heard him refer to, themselves. They heard the assistant referee refer to the other person as that, and they took offense to that, and that's their prerogative to do. They're absolutely okay. They're absolutely fine with doing that. I think the assistant referee also handled it the wrong way. Look, if I say something offensive, right? And even if I don't think it's offensive and someone else deems it offensive, I really shouldn't, reply and try and retort to that by saying, well, it's my language, man. In my language, that just means that black guy. First of all, it's a very silly way to address someone. It's a very, very silly way. People have names. You know, people have different descriptions. You know, you can describe someone without the color of their skin, and you may argue, well, what's wrong with the color of the skin? Why can't you address someone like that black guy, that white guy, so on and so forth? Why can't you address that? You know, the reason for that is because of the cultural, the cultural and also the historical, connotations that certain descriptors have. Which is why I can, for example, say something along the lines of, that person has blue eyes, that person has green eyes. There is nothing wrong with that because there is no historical, no cultural uh, identifier. Maybe not identifier, but there's no cultural bias against that. There is no historical bias against. There is no historical a negative connotation with that. If I compare that now to say, I don't know, that black guy with the massive lips, the big nose, and the wide eyes, that has historical. Granted, again, it depends which culture you go to, because I guess in Japan, what they call, like, there is a certain term for it, but like everyone, majority in Western culture, that would be seen as a negative connotation. That would be seen as a negative way of looking at someone, and you just have to, like, be more aware. I know it's it's very easy for me to say, be more aware of what someone might find offensive, because at the end of the day, there are 100,000 billion, well, not 100 billion, but there are 100,000 different cultures in this world. There are 100 different races in this world. We all, as I said as well, as I said earlier on, like, if you think of, like, the Jamaican culture, and the reason why I'm thinking Jamaican culture is just because, many people are aware of the Jamaican culture. If you think of the Jamaican culture, there are many different subcultures in there. So it can be very difficult to know what is deemed offensive, what might be culturally insensitive. But still, you should still, you should still be aware of what might be perceived as wrong. Even if you don't intend it, you should still be aware of what might be perceived as wrong. It's why referees, they generally speak in English. Not always, but they generally speak in English. International referees, they generally speak in English, so that, like, words can't be